Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Trevor. I learned that coming home unexpectedly, without announcement, can reveal truths you'd never have discovered otherwise. And that sometimes the worst betrayal is also the clearest gift, showing you exactly who someone is before you legally bind yourself to them forever. I'd been with Simone for 4 years when I came home from a canceled flight at 3 in the morning to find another man opening my door and calling out to my fiancée. For years that I'd thought were building toward marriage and partnership, but that apparently contained secrets and betrayals I'd been completely blind to. If you enjoy stories like this, take a moment to tap the like button and leave a comment on where you're watching from. Let's know ourselves. Now back to the story. We met when we were both living in Charlotte and working professional jobs. I was in business consulting, traveling frequently to consult for clients across the Southeast. Simone worked in human resources for a healthcare company. We'd met through a dating app, had immediate chemistry, and started seeing each other seriously within weeks. The relationship had progressed naturally through normal stages. Dating exclusively after a few months, confessing our love around 6 months, and meeting each other's families. Around the 2-year mark, we started discussing moving in together. My consulting work meant I traveled frequently. Being gone that often made maintaining a relationship challenging. We thought living together would help us stay connected despite my demanding schedule. I found a 2-bedroom apartment in a nice area of Charlotte. Signed a lease in my name since my income and credit were stronger. Moved in together and settled into cohabiting life. The arrangement worked well initially. When I was home, we had quality time together. When I traveled, Simone had the apartment to herself. We navigated the logistics of shared space and schedules without any significant conflict. Around year 3, I proposed, and Simone enthusiastically said yes. We were both excited about getting married and making our partnership official. We started planning the wedding immediately. Simone wanted a big, elaborate event with a large venue, an extensive guest list, and all the traditional elements. We set a wedding date about 10 months out to give time for planning and saving. Our relationship during the engagement wasn't perfect. We had occasional arguments like any couple, disagreements over wedding details, finances, and household responsibilities. Nothing about the argument felt catastrophic. Just standard relationship friction. About 6 months into our engagement, Simone began complaining more frequently about her job. She said she was underpaid and overworked. According to her, the company didn't value her contributions, and the stress was affecting her mental and physical health. She talked about quitting frequently. I'd encourage her to look for better opportunities while staying employed. Standard advice about not leaving a job before securing the next one. But one day Simone came home and announced she'd quit. She said that she walked into her manager's office and resigned, effective immediately, with no backup plan or job lined up. I was surprised but tried to be supportive. I asked about her plans for finding new work. She said she needed time to decompress from a toxic environment, that she'd start looking after a few weeks of rest. Those few weeks turned into months. Simone would occasionally apply for jobs, but without urgency or real effort. She would say the market was tough or that available positions weren't quite right. Meanwhile, I was covering all our expenses. Rent, utilities, groceries, everything. My consulting salary was enough to support both of us comfortably, but it significantly shifted our dynamic. I became the sole provider. Simone became financially dependent on me. I didn't complain about supporting her financially. I figured she'd find work eventually, that this was temporary, and we'd get back to both contributing once she was employed again. About 4 months after Simone quit her job, I had a work trip scheduled, a routine client engagement in another state. I'd be gone about 4 days, handling workshops and strategy sessions. The trip came up with relatively short notice, as consulting projects often did. I told Simone the timeline. She seemed fine with it. We'd navigated dozens of my work trips over the 4 years we'd been together. This was just another one. The morning I was scheduled to leave, everything felt normal. We had breakfast together. She kissed me goodbye when I went to my office. I worked a full day, came home to pack my luggage, then headed to the airport around 8:30 in the evening for a 10 o'clock flight. I got to the airport in plenty of time. Checked in, made it through security, found my gate, and settled in to wait for boarding. The departure time came and went. The airline announced a delay, mechanical issue that would take about an hour to resolve. That hour turned into 2 hours, then 3. The airline kept announcing delays in 30-minute increments, kept insisting the flight would depart soon. I didn't update Simone about the delays. It was after 11 at night by that point. She'd likely gone to sleep. There was no reason to text her about flight delays she couldn't do anything about. Around 1:30 in the morning, the airline finally announced that the flight had been canceled entirely. The mechanical issue couldn't be resolved. They'd rebook all passengers on flights the following day. I went to the customer service desk, got rebooked on an 11 o'clock morning flight. I considered staying at the airport, but that meant sitting in uncomfortable chairs for 9 hours. So I decided to go home instead. I could sleep in my own bed for a few hours, shower and change, then return to the airport in the morning. I took a rideshare back to our apartment. Arrived around 3 in the morning. Expected to find the apartment dark and Simone sleeping. Instead, I noticed light under our door as I approached. It was like someone had left a lamp on. Unusual, but not alarming. Maybe Simone had fallen asleep watching TV. I knocked rather than using my key. Didn't want to startle her by walking in unexpectedly if she was awake. What happened next unfolded in slow motion, despite lasting only seconds. The door opened. A man stood there, shirtless, wearing only boxer shorts. Hair disheveled. Looking confused about who was knocking at 3 in the morning. He looked at me, standing in the hallway. Didn't recognize me, didn't understand who I was or why I was there. He turned his head back toward the apartment interior and called out, "Baby, someone's here." The casual intimacy of that word, baby, called at my apartment, to my fiancée. Time stopped. My brain tried to process what was happening. This half-dressed man is in my home, calling Simone baby. At 3 in the morning, Simone's voice came from the bedroom, sleepy and annoyed, telling whoever it was that she was asleep, that they should handle it. The man turned back to me, about to say something, maybe to ask who I was or what I wanted. I pushed past him firmly and walked directly toward the bedroom where Simone's voice had come from. She was in our bed, which I paid for in the apartment, sitting up now, holding the sheet to her chest, hair messy, eyes wide with shock as she saw me standing in the doorway. Recognition and panic crossed her face simultaneously. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. She said it wasn't what I thought, that she could explain. The classic phrases people say when caught in inexcusable situations. I stood there feeling like I was watching this happen to someone else, like I'd stepped out of my body and was observing from a distance. The man had followed me to the bedroom. He was now behind me, trying to understand what was happening, realizing slowly that I wasn't a neighbor or friend, that I was someone with a key to this apartment and a reason to be shocked by his presence. He started gathering his clothes, pants draped over a chair, shirt on the floor, moving in this panicked scramble to get dressed and leave. I blocked the doorway, told him he wasn't going anywhere yet, that he was leaving, but on my timeline, not his. Simone kept begging, asking me to wait, saying she could explain everything if I'd just listen, that this wasn't what it looked like, even though it was exactly what it looked like. I felt rage building. I felt betrayal crushing my chest. I felt this overwhelming numbness underneath the anger, like my emotions couldn't fully process what was happening. The man said he didn't know, or had no idea I existed, claiming that Simone had told him she lived alone, that he'd never have been here if he'd known she had a boyfriend or fiancé. I looked at Simone. She was crying now, still holding the sheet, still trying to find words that would make this something other than what it obviously was. I told them both to get out, but as the man tried to grab his clothes again, I told him to leave the house without the clothes. He tried to protest, but saw the anger on my face, then left the house in just his boxers. Simone protested, said she lived here and this was her home too, that I couldn't just kick her out in the middle of the night. I told her I absolutely could, that my name was on the lease, that she'd been living here as my guest, that her guest privileges were revoked effective immediately. She tried reasoning with me, said we needed to talk about this like adults, that throwing her out wouldn't solve anything, that I was making this worse by reacting emotionally. I ignored her words, went to the wardrobe and grabbed some of her clothes, threw them at her, told her to get dressed and get out, or I'd call the police and have them both removed for trespassing. The man was already gone. He had fled the apartment as soon as he'd gotten his chance and was probably terrified of confrontation or police involvement. Simone got dressed slowly, still crying and insisting she could explain if I just calmed down and listen. I stood by the door, held it open, told her to leave. She walked to the door, then stopped. She turned to face me, started saying she was sorry, that she'd made a terrible mistake, that she loved me and didn't want to lose me. I stepped aside so she could exit without responding to any of her words. She walked into the hallway, stood there looking back at me, mascara running down her face, clothes disheveled, looking lost and desperate. I closed the door, locked it, and stood there for a moment with my hand on the door, feeling my heart pounding. Then I walked to the living room couch and sat down in the dark apartment in the morning, trying to process that my 4-year relationship and engagement had just imploded in the span of 10 minutes. I sat there until sunrise because I couldn't sleep and stop replaying everything. I checked my phone around 6 in the morning. I had dozens of missed calls and text messages from Simone. Starting around the time she must have left the apartment building. Her messages said she needed to talk to me, that I had to let her explain, that this wasn't what it seemed, that she loved me and we could work through this. I deleted them all without reading most of them. I couldn't handle looking at her or reading anything she says right now. Around 8 in the morning, I called a locksmith and explained I needed my locks changed immediately, that this was an emergency situation. The locksmith arrived within an hour, changed all the locks on my apartment door, and gave me new keys. I paid him and felt marginally more secure knowing Simone couldn't let herself back in. I had to leave for the airport shortly after to catch my rebooked 11 o'clock flight for the work trip I'd been traveling for yesterday evening, when my life had been completely different. Simone's calls and messages continued flooding in as I was driven to the airport. I silenced my phone. I couldn't deal with her attempts at contact while trying to function enough to travel and work. The 4 days I was gone for the client engagement were surreal. I had to show up and facilitate workshops and strategy sessions while feeling completely destroyed on the inside. When I checked my phone during breaks, I would see more messages from Simone. There were long texts alternating between apologizing, explaining, begging, and justifying. I saw messages from her best friend too, telling me it had been a mistake and that Simone was devastated, that I should at least hear her out before making any permanent decisions. I didn't respond to any of it. I only focused on getting through each day of work on this trip, on maintaining enough professional composure to do my job, on not falling apart completely until I could get home and process privately. During that 4-day trip, I made decisions about what would happen when I returned. I knew I couldn't see Simone, couldn't have conversations with her, couldn't listen to explanations or apologies that wouldn't change what had happened. I decided I'd pack her belongings and leave them for her to collect, and I'd handle ending things through text and action rather than through discussion. I flew home, emotionally drained but resolved, and arrived in Charlotte late in the evening. I went to the apartment that now felt different, tainted by what had happened there. I spent the next day packing all of Simone's belongings, clothes, toiletries, personal items, everything that was hers. I loaded it carefully into boxes and bags, carried everything outside, and stacked it by the building entrance. Sent her one brief text, "Your things are outside the building. Come pick them up today." Then left. I went to a coffee shop and sat there for hours. I didn't want to be present when she came to collect her stuff and didn't want to risk seeing her or being drawn into conversation. Simone responded immediately to the text. Multiple messages saying we needed to talk first. That she couldn't just pick up her things and disappear from my life. That I owed her a conversation after 4 years together. I didn't respond. I sat at the coffee shop until evening, then drove around aimlessly for another hour. Then, I finally went back to the apartment at night when I was sure she had picked up her things. Her belongings were gone from where I'd left them. She'd come and taken everything. I had dozens more unread text messages, voice notes, and missed calls, all trying to get me to engage, to talk to her, to give her a chance to explain, apologize, or fix this somehow. I went inside my apartment, realizing that the relationship was truly over. That whatever we'd been building toward was wrecked. I felt grief mixed with anger and relief, grieving the loss of what I thought we had, angry about the betrayal, relieved that I'd discovered this before we were married rather than after. The weeks and months that followed were difficult. I had to process the emotional trauma of that night, the realization of how completely I'd been deceived. I started questioning everything about our relationship. Had there been signs I'd missed? How long had this been going on? Had she been cheating the entire time we'd lived together, or was this new? I tortured myself with questions I'd never have answers to. I soon realized I'd probably never know the whole truth about when, or how, or why she betrayed me. I know I will struggle with trusting anyone in the future. I couldn't imagine trusting someone enough to be vulnerable again. After a while, I went to therapy to process everything. My therapist helped me work through the betrayal without becoming bitter or closed off permanently. My therapist helped me understand that Simone's choices reflected her character, not my worth. That I'd done nothing to deserve or cause her infidelity. That I could heal and eventually trust again, even though it didn't feel possible in the aftermath. Simone continued trying to contact me for months. The messages became less frequent over time, but never fully stopped. I would get texts on holidays or on what would have been our anniversary. There were attempts to maintain some connection, even though I'd made clear through silence that I wanted none. I never responded to any of them because I had said everything I needed to say by packing her belongings and sending that one text. There was nothing more to communicate. 3 years after I came home to find another man in my apartment, I understand everything more clearly. I learned that canceled flights and unexpected returns can reveal truths you'd never discover otherwise. If my flight hadn't been canceled, I probably wouldn't have known about Simone's cheating. I would have continued planning a wedding to someone who was betraying me. I learned that financial dependence can enable poor behavior. Simone quitting her job and becoming fully reliant on my income had created a dynamic in which she felt entitled to everything I provided, while giving nothing back, including basic faithfulness. I learned that betrayal trauma affects your ability to trust in ways that last long after the relationship ends. 3 years later, I still sometimes struggle with paranoia or suspicion, even though most people deserve the benefit of the doubt. I learned that silence can be the most powerful response to someone seeking engagement. That Simone had wanted conversation, explanation, argument, anything that would have kept me connected to her. My silence was the clearest signal that we were done. Most importantly, I learned that discovering betrayal before marriage is a gift, even when it feels like a betrayal. That as painful as that night was, it saved me from much worse, from marrying someone untrustworthy, from potentially having children with her, from years more investment before the inevitable collapse. You might think I should have listened to Simone's explanations, should have heard her out before making permanent decisions, should have considered whether the relationship could be saved. But I disagree. No explanation would make finding another man in my bed acceptable. No story that would transform betrayal into something forgivable. She'd brought someone into my home while I was traveling for work to earn the money that supported both of us. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. A series of choices, all of which demonstrated exactly who she was and how little she valued our relationship. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust someone again the way I trusted Simone. But I'm working on building a different kind of trust. More cautious, but also more realistic. Based on consistent behavior over time rather than assumptions and hope. That's what I survived. And I'm still here. Still healing and still moving forward. I'm not there yet, but I'm getting closer. And that's enough. That's everything.